She was 7 months pregnant, alone in a collapsing cabin, clutching her belly, while a red sandstorm screamed outside like the end of the world. "Take my child," she whispered to the darkness. "Just save my child." Then a Comanche warrior stepped through the door, blood on his hands and ghosts in his eyes, and answered with 5 words that changed everything. "No, both of you. Come with me." One desperate widow, one outlawed warrior, one unborn baby, and a land that devours the weak. This is the true frontier story of how love was forged in gunfire, and redemption rode in on a paint horse. Hit subscribe right now, so you never miss a story this raw. Comment the city or country you're listening from. I read every single one, and stay until the very last second, because the ending will leave you speechless. Let's ride. The wind came down the Absaroka like a Comanche war party, screaming across the high benches and driving sheets of red sand that stung like buckshot. December 1872. The sky had turned the color of dried blood, and every breath tasted of grit and death. Inside the last cabin in the valley, Nora Bell sat on the dirt floor with her back against the wall, knees drawn up as far as her 7th-month belly would allow. The stove was cold iron. The last stick of pine had burned to white ash 3 days ago. Henry was 3 weeks in the ground. 1. 44 slug behind the ear, courtesy of Silas Calhoun, land office wolf in a government coat. Henry had refused to translate the forged treaty that would have stolen the Crow's last river bottom. Calhoun repaid honesty the way men like him always do. Now the hoofbeats were coming. 3 riders. She could tell by the rhythm. 2 heavy Pinkertons and Calhoun's lighter thoroughbred. They wanted the ledger Henry had hidden under the floorboards, every false signature, every bribe, every acre stolen. And they wanted silence. Permanent silence. Nora pressed both palms against the hard curve of her stomach. The baby kicked once, weakly, like it already knew the odds. She had no rifle left, only Henry's old Navy Colt with 2 cartridges and a cracked grip. Not enough to stop 3 men. Not enough to save herself. She dragged herself to her knees, dragged in a lungful of freezing, sand-choked air, and spoke to the empty room the way her mother had once taught her to pray. If anyone finds this place, if anyone still rides honest in this country, take my child. When he comes, cut him from me if you have to. Just get him clear of here. Get him clear of Calhoun. The doorframe rattled. Wind or men, she couldn't tell. She closed her eyes, waiting for the muzzle flash. Instead, the door burst inward, and a man filled the gap, tall as a lodgepole, wrapped in a black buffalo robe gone crimson with blown sand. A paint horse snorted behind him, eyes rolling white. The man's face was striped with war paint, the color of fresh liver. Long braids whipped across a chest scarred by old lance cuts. A Winchester rested easily in the crook of his arm, but he wasn't pointing it. Not yet. Nora's voice cracked like thin ice. "You speak English." He stepped inside, boots silent on the frozen dirt, and let the door swing half shut against the storm. His eyes, black as river stones, dropped to her belly, then rose to her face. "I speak enough." She tried to stand, failed, sank back. "They're coming for the book Henry hid, and for me, and for him." She pressed a shaking hand to the child inside her. "I can't outrun them. I can't fight them. Take the baby when he's born. Ride south. The Comanche still honor the sanctuary, please." The warrior crouched, slow, the way a man approaches a spooked mare. Sand cascaded from his shoulders. He smelled of horse sweat, pine smoke, and iron. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind, trying to tear the cabin off its foundations. Then he reached out, calloused palm hovering an inch above her belly, not quite touching. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if answering. His voice came low, steady, carrying the weight of 1,000 miles of open plain. No, Nora's breath caught. He met her eyes, unflinching. I will not take a child and leave his mother to die. That is not our way. Tears cut clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Outside, the riders were close enough now that she could hear the creak of saddle leather and the jingle of Calhoun's silver spurs. The Comanche rose in one fluid motion, extended his hand. Both of you come with me. Nora stared at the offered hand, scarred, steady, strong enough to break a man's neck or cradle a newborn. She took it. He pulled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing, wrapped his buffalo robe around her shoulders, and lifted her sideways onto the paint horse. The animal danced, feeling the extra weight, but the warrior's murmur calmed it instantly. Boots thundered on the porch. The first Pinkerton kicked the door wide, revolver raised. He never finished the sentence. The Comanche's Winchester spoke once. The Pinkerton dropped like a feed sack. The second man fired wildly. The bullet splintered the doorframe inches from Nora's head. The warrior swung up behind her, one iron arm locking around her waist, careful of the belly, and dug heels into the paint's flanks. The horse exploded forward, leaping the fallen man, crashing through the flimsy corral fence into the teeth of the red storm. Behind them, Calhoun's furious shout was swallowed by the wind. Ahead lay nothing but blood-colored sand and the faint tracks of a man who had decided, in that single heartbeat, to risk everything for a white woman he'd never met and a child who hadn't yet drawn breath. The chase had begun. The paint horse thundered south through a world turned to grinding rust. Sand lashed Nora's face like hot lead shot. She buried it against the warrior's back and felt the steady drum of his heart under layers of buffalo hide and muscle. Quanah rode low, one arm cinched around her waist, palms spread protectively over the hard mound of her belly. Every jolt of the horse's hooves sent fire through her hips, but she bit down on the pain and held on. Behind them, the storm swallowed Calhoun's curses and the crack of Pinkerton rifles. Quanah never looked back. He guided the paint along dry washes and up knife-edge ridges where no shod horse should go, reading the land the way a preacher reads scripture. Twice he reined in sharply, pressed Nora flat against the saddle while he scanned the back trail. Nothing but swirling red devils. Night dropped suddenly and black. The temperature plunged like a stone in deep water. Quanah found a cutbank overhang, slid from the saddle, and lifted Nora down as gently as if she were made of raw egg. Her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground. Easy. Storm's covering our tracks, but it'll kill us just as quick if we don't get warm. He scraped a hollow in the lee of the bank, lined it with his saddle blanket, and built a Dakota fire pit no bigger than a hat. 2 holes connected underground, so the glow couldn't be seen from a mile out. Mesquite roots he'd carried in his pouch caught quickly. The heat felt like mercy. Nora sat shivering while he boiled snow in a tin cup over the hidden flame and mixed it with pemmican and parched corn. He knelt, held the cup to her lips. Drink slow. Child needs it more than you do. She obeyed. The broth was salty, rich, alive. Strength trickled back into her bones. Between sips, she told him about the ledger, how Henry had copied every forged page by lamplight, how he'd sworn one day the truth would ride into Washington on a fast horse. Quanah listened without expression, turning a strip of jerky over the coals. When she finished, he only nodded. Your man died straight. That counts for something out here. He checked the paint's legs, rubbed them down with sage, then came back and sat across the fire, Winchester across his knees. Nora studied the war paint still streaking his cheekbones, the eagle feather tied in his hair. What do they call you? Quanah. My mother was Nusana. A white woman taken long ago. The whites call her Cynthia Ann. His mouth twisted, half bitter, half proud. They never could decide if I was savage or citizen, so they made me both. The fire settled into coals. Somewhere far off a coyote yipped, then went silent. Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. Calhoun won't stop. He has paper from the army now. Says I'm harboring stolen government property. Says the child will be a ward of the territory if I don't hand over the book. Quanah's eyes reflected the low red glow. Let him come. Paper burns the same as anything else. Dawn came pale and iron cold. The storm had blown itself out, leaving a landscape scoured, clean, and hostile. They rode again, harder now, following game trails that twisted like rattlesnakes. By midday, Nora's back was a white-hot knot, and blood spotted her thighs. She said nothing. Quanah saw anyway. He pulled up in a cedar brake, dismounted, and cut a thick branch of red cedar. With his knife, he shaved it smooth, shaped a cradleboard frame, and padded it with rabbit fur from his pouch. 10 minutes work. Lie back against this. Takes weight off your spine. She wanted to argue. She was white. He was Comanche. Pride was all either of them had left. But the pain won. She leaned into the makeshift rest and felt the baby shift, calmer. They pushed south another 30 miles before the paint started to flake off its foreleg. Stone bruise. Quanah cursed once in Numu Tekwapu, short, sharp, final, then swung down and led the horse on foot. Nora tried to walk too. He shook his head. You ride, I walk. Baby stays high. The sun bled out across the plains. Behind them, smoke rose thin and black. Calhoun burning cabins looking for a sign. Quanah glanced at it, then at her. Listen close, he said, voice low. 3 days to the Red River. My people winter there. Once we cross, his badges mean nothing. But we have to reach it alive. Nora swallowed dust and fear. And if we don't? He looked at her straight. No softness, no promises. Then we die free. He started walking again, leading the limping paint into the gathering dark. If you're feeling this story hit you in the chest, the way it's hitting me, telling it, do me a solid. Tap subscribe right now. These old trails don't tell themselves, and I don't want you missing what comes next. Quanah still has a long way to carry her, and the price is only getting higher. They walked on, 2 shadows and 1 heartbeat against the coming night. 3 more dawns bled across the plains before the Red River finally showed itself. A wide, rust-colored ribbon cutting through buffalo grass, gone silver with frost. Quanah's limp had worsened. The paint's stone bruise had turned into a throbbing abscess, but the horse never faltered. When the river's cottonwoods rose on the horizon, Nora felt the baby drop lower, a sudden heavy ache that made her bite her lip until she tasted blood. They crested the last rise at dusk. Below, the winter camp of the Noconi Comanche lay in a sheltered bend, 40 lodges of smoke-stained hide, horse herds grazing under armed guard, the low chant of women grinding corn drifting on the wind. Fires glowed like scattered coals. The smell of roasting hump meat and boiling dogwood tea rolled up the slope and hit Nora like a promise. Quanah raised one arm in the old sign. I bring no war. A dozen riders peeled off the herd and came at a gallop, lances low, faces painted black for mourning or battle. When they recognized him, lances lifted, and a shout went up that rattled across the valley. An old man with a single hawk feather in his hair pushed through the circle. Piaru Ak, his uncle, keeper of the medicine bundle. The old man's eyes flicked from Quanah's blood-crusted arm to Nora's swollen belly, and the exhaustion carved deep in both their faces. He spoke in Numu Tekwapu, rapid and low. Quanah answered the same, voice rough from days without water. Piaruach spat once, nodded, and barked orders. Two women took Nora's arms, gentle but firm, and led her toward the largest lodge. She glanced back. Quanah was already sliding from the saddle, swaying, the paint folded to its knees the moment his weight left it. Inside the lodge, the air was thick with cedar smoke and the sweet bite of dried sweet grass. They stripped her trail-stiff dress, washed the blood from her thighs with warm water, scented with sage, and wrapped her in soft doeskin. A midwife with iron-gray braids pressed skilled fingers along Nora's belly, grunted approval, then forced a cup of bitter willow bark tea between her lips. "Boy child," the woman said in broken English. "Strong. But you wait. Not yet." Outside, the camp council had already begun. Nora could hear the drum of voices through the lodge walls. Quanah telling them about Calhoun, about the ledger, about the cavalry contract now riding north with a $500 bounty on a Comanche scalp and a white woman's unborn child. She dozed, woke, dozed again. Each time she opened her eyes, the fire had been fell, and Quanah sat across from her, cleaning his Winchester with slow, deliberate strokes. His left arm was bound tight with rawhide. The bullet groove had been cauterized with a hot knife. He looked up when he felt her gaze. "They vote at moonrise," he said quietly. "Some say we bring soldiers. Some say we bring truth. Truth is heavier." Nora pushed herself upright. Pain lanced through her lower back, but she ignored it. "And you? I say we end it before the child draws breath in a world owned by liars." Moonrise came cold and white. The council circle filled. Old men, war chiefs, women whose sons had died on the staked plains. Quanah stood at the center, shirt stripped to the waist, so all could see the fresh wound and the older scars, lance, bullet, knife, that mapped every promise he had ever kept. He spoke without raising his voice, but the plains themselves seemed to listen. "Calhoun rides with 20 bluecoats now. He burns lodges looking for a sign. He will come here when the snow seals the passes. If we run again, the woman gives birth on the trail and dies. If we wait, soldiers come with Gatling guns. There is one other way." He drew Henry's ledger from inside his shirt, held it up so the firelight showed the blood-stained cover. "This book names every thief from Denver to Washington. One copy rides east with a Quahati runner tonight. But the man who carries the name Silas Calhoun must die by Comanche hand, or the soldiers will call it murder and burn this camp to ash." Silence. Then Piaruach stood. "The council has spoken. The woman and child are under our protection. Quanah leads the war party. 10 riders. No prisoners." Nora felt the baby turn hard, a fist against her ribs. She pressed both hands to the drum-tight skin and whispered to the life inside her. "Hold on, little one. Just a little longer." Quanah stepped from the circle, came to her. For the first time since the cabin, he touched her face, thumb brushing the hollow beneath her eye. 2 days, he said. "We meet Calhoun at the old Crow burial ground north of the Canadian. After that, no more running." She caught his wrist. "Bring yourself back. The child will need a name that means something." He nodded once, eyes unreadable in the firelight, then turned and walked into the night, where 10 shadows waited with fresh horses and sharpened steel. Behind him, the drum began. Slow, steady, the heartbeat of a people who had already lost everything once and refused to lose it again. The war party rode north under a moon thin as a skinning blade. 10 riders and 1 empty saddle. Quanah had left it for the spirit of the child still waiting to be born. They moved like smoke across the frozen Canadian, hooves wrapped in rawhide so no iron rang against stone. 2 nights later, they reached the old Crow burial ground. a chaos of wind-carved pillars rising from the snow like the ribs of some dead giant. Scaffold graves creaked overhead, wrapped bundles swaying gently, bones clicking in the wind. The place smelled of sage and old death. Calhoun was already there. 20 bluecoats ringed the stones, torches guttering in the wind, carbines glinting. Calhoun himself sat a big Missouri trotter in the center, greatcoat open to show the silver badge that had bought him so many graves. He held a Remington across his pommel and a coiled riata in his left hand. Nora rode in the middle of the Comanche line, belly huge under a borrowed buffalo robe, Henry's ledger tied tight against her breast with rawhide. She had refused to stay behind. The child inside her kicked hard, as if sensing the stink of the man who had murdered its father. Calhoun's smile was thin and yellow. "Evening, Mrs. Bell. You've led me a damn fine chase. Hand over the book, and the breed bastard walks away. Keep it, and I gut you right here. Slow, so the half-bloods can watch the brat come out the hard way." Quanah nudged his horse forward one step. Torchlight painted the fresh blood on his bandages black. "You talk too much for a dead man," Calhoun laughed, jerked his chin. 2 soldiers dragged a bound figure from the shadows, a Quahati runner, the one carrying the second copy of the Ledger East. His face was pulped, one ear gone. "Runner talked before he stopped," Calhoun said. "Your little mail service is finished. Now give me the woman." Nora felt the baby drop another inch. A hot gush between her thighs told her the water had broken miles back. She locked her knees on the saddle and stared Calhoun down. "You'll have to cut him out of me, same as you cut Henry's tongue out for telling the truth." Calhoun shrugged, drew his Remington, and leveled it at her belly. "Then we do it the army way." The night exploded. Quanah's bow sang first, one arrow burying itself to the fletching in the throat of the nearest torchbearer. Torches fell, and darkness rushed in. Comanche war cries split the frozen air like axes. Rifles cracked. Soldiers screamed as lances punched through wool coats. Horses reared and crashed against stone. Calhoun spurred straight at Nora, the riata whistling for her throat. She yanked Henry's old Navy Colt from under the robe, 2 loads left, and fired point blank into his horse's chest. The animal went down, screaming, pinning Calhoun beneath it. He came up roaring, face shredded by gravel, Remington spitting fire. The bullet took Quanah high in the chest as he vaulted from his horse to shield her. He staggered but kept coming, knife flashing. Calhoun swung the empty revolver like a club. Quanah ducked under it, drove upward with the bowie. Steel met steel once, twice, sparks in the moonlight. Then Quanah twisted and buried the blade to the hilt under Calhoun's ribs. Calhoun's eyes went wide. Blood poured black over Quanah's fist. "You red son of a..." Quanah leaned close, voice calm as winter water. "This land remembers every thief." He ripped the knife free. Calhoun folded like a gut-shot steer. The last soldier broke and ran. A Comanche lance took him between the shoulder blades. Silence fell, broken only by the wind and the wet rattle of dying men. Nora slid from the saddle, legs giving out. A sharp pain doubled her over. Another contraction, harder, closer. She clutched the ledger slick with Calhoun's blood and looked for Quanah. He was on his knees 10 feet away, one hand pressed to the hole in his chest, blood pumping between his fingers in steady pulses. She crawled to him through the snow, already turning red. "Stay with me," she gasped. "The boy's coming. You promised him a name." Quanah's grin was crooked, teeth white against the blood. "Henry Quanah," he rasped. Strong like his father, fierce like his mother. Another contraction ripped through her. She screamed once, gripped his hand until bones ground. Above them, the burial scaffolds creaked, old bones singing approval. The child was coming, right there among the stones and the dead. while the man who had carried them both this far bled his life into the frozen ground. The first light of 1873 crept over the burial ground, pale and merciless, turning the snow pink where Calhoun's blood had soaked through. Nora was on her knees between two standing stones, legs splayed wide, skirt rucked up around her thighs. The contractions came like rifle volleys now. No pause, no mercy. Quanah lay 3 feet away, back against a scaffold pole, shirt torn open, the hole in his chest bubbling with every shallow breath. He had dragged himself upright so he could watch the child come into the world he had just bought with his own blood. 2 Comanche women worked fast, one boiling snow in a cavalry canteen over a hat-sized fire, the other pressing a folded blanket between Nora's teeth when the screams threatened to split the dawn. Quanah's uncle Piaru Ak knelt opposite, knife heated red in the coals, ready to cut the cord with steel that had never known defeat. Nora bore down one last time. A roar tore from her throat that belonged to something older than pain. The boy slid free into Piaru Ak's waiting hands, slick, furious, fists already swinging at the cold. The old man lifted him high so the rising sun struck his wet skin, then laid him on Nora's chest. She looked down through sweat and tears. Dark hair, Henry's nose, Quanah's fierce black eyes already open and staring at the sky like he intended to own it. "Henry Quanah Bell," she whispered, voice raw. "Welcome to hard country." Quanah's lips moved. No sound came, but she read them clearly. Good name. They cauterized his wound with the same knife, packed it with sage and gunpowder, and bound it tight with strips torn from a dead soldier's coat. He never passed out. When they lifted him onto a travois behind the strongest pony, his eyes stayed fixed on mother and son. The ride south took 9 days. Snow turned to sleet, sleet to freezing rain. Nora rode wrapped in buffalo robes, the baby tied against her breast, Comanche style, drinking mare's milk when her own ran dry. Quanah drifted in and out of fever dreams, calling once for his mother, Cynthia Ann, once for a little sister, lost at the Washita. Each time Nora leaned over the travois and pressed her forehead to his burning one until the ghosts quieted. They reached Virginia City in March, half the territory talking about the dead land office agent and the white woman who rode in with 10 painted warriors and a newborn tied to her chest. The federal judge took one look at Henry's ledger, still crusted with Calhoun's blood, and the sworn testimony of Piaru Ak delivered in perfect Spanish through an interpreter, and the gavel fell like thunder. Silas Calhoun, posthumously stripped of office, all land claims voided. Quanah Tsehe, full pardon, bounty canceled. Nora Bell, legal guardian of every acre Henry had died defending. Spring came hard and suddenly. Snowmelt roared down the canyons, turning the high plains green overnight. On a rise above the ranch Henry had never lived to see, Quanah stood shirtless in the wind, the scar on his chest a ragged purple star. The baby, already crawling, already pulling himself up on anything that didn't move, tugged at his leggings and laughed when Quanah swung him high. Nora watched from the new cabin door, coffee tin cup in hand. The land stretched west to the mountains, east to the horizon, free and clear. Quanah set the boy on his hip and walked over. Sunlight caught the silver concho on his belt, the same one that had once held a cavalry saber. "Paper says it's yours now," he said, nodding at the endless grass. "Paper's wrong," she answered. "It's ours, all 3 of us." He studied her a long moment, wind whipping his braids. "I spent my life riding away from cages," he said. "Army forts, reservations, treaties written in blood. Thought freedom meant no ties." The baby grabbed Quanah's eagle feather and tried to eat it. Quanah let him. "Turns out," he continued, voice rough as river gravel. Freedom's right here. A woman who won't break, and a boy who'll outrun the wind. Nora stepped close, laid her free hand over the scar she had watched closely. Then stay, she said. No more running. This is the end of the trail. Quanah looked out over the greening plains, then down at the child already reaching for the horizon. No, he said quietly. This is where the new one starts. He bent his head and kissed her once, hard, tasting of sage smoke and gunpowder, and the promise that some things, once earned the hardest way possible, are never taken again. Behind them, the cabin door stood open, smoke curling from a stove that would never go cold. Ahead lay 1,000 miles of open country and a lifetime to ride it together. In the spring of 1873, on a Montana hill no map had yet named, a Comanche warrior, a white widow, and their half-blood son claimed the only territory that ever truly mattered. The ground they stood on, side by side, rifles across their knees, and the future in their arms. The frontier kept its secrets, but that day it gave one back. The red sand has settled, the guns are silent, and a Comanche warrior, a white widow, and their half-blood son now ride the same horizon under one sky. That's the frontier I love, brutal, bloody, and every once in a while, capable of something that looks a lot like grace. Drop a comment and tell me, what hit you hardest? The moment Quanah said, both of you come with me, the birth among the stones, or the quiet kiss on that hill. Let me know where you're listening from. I read every single one. Appreciate you riding this trail with me. More dust, more truth, more unbreakable hearts coming soon. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your heart open. See you down the trail.